We have a lot of first-timers, and that's a great thing. The Perl and Raku Foundation, you probably heard the name. Obviously, we're the ones that are, producing this conference and making it happen. We want you to know a little about us as an organization. And even people who have been in the community for years and years and years, we get a lot of, well, the foundation is doing this and this. No, we don't. This is what we're doing. Well, the foundation ought to do this and this. No, this is what we're doing. So today, kind of the opening matter of this is, who are we and what do we do? Just to fill in the blanks. The actual foundation is an organization called Yet Another Society. Now, that's a historical artifact of the fact that the original Perl Conference later became OSCON, and O'Reilly ran off with the name, and there's a whole story that could be told there, and I could spend an hour, but I'm not going to. We do business as the Perl and Raku Foundation, but the name on the checks is Yet Another Society. All of the people who serve on the board, all of the people who have ever served on the board, and to my knowledge, everybody who ever will, is a volunteer. They're doing it free. Nobody gets paid. You can derive from that one simple fact. This ain't anybody's day job. None of us do this for a living. I'm fortunate in that I'm partly retired, kind of in a weird sort of way. Thank you, boss. My boss is sitting right down here, so I have to be nice to him because he's also got the timing clock. So I have a little more time to do some of this, which has been very helpful with me putting together this conference, of course. But we're all volunteers here. We're people who care about Perl and Raku and about Perl and Raku people, the community, the events, the artifacts that we as a community have put together, both in software and in people space, right? The current members of the board. Stuart McIntosh, our president, British man living in Europe. You don't see much of him on this side of the pond. He hasn't gotten over here in a few years. He almost did this year. Almost. Peter, if you were in Vegas last year, you saw Peter or a blur that resembled Peter going by, running back and forth, taking care of everything. That pink-haired thing, we're going to skip that. I have recently taken up the role of co-treasurer. What that means is I'm empowered by the board to do all the stuff that the treasurer can do. Taking care of our books, taking care of our accounts, helping with all of that. Peter just got overloaded. Life happens to all of us, right? And Peter lost a job, and he's got family stuff going on, and a kid, and just busy. And he just really kind of needed some space. For legal reasons, he holds the title of treasurer, and I do keep him very well informed on what's going on in case regulators were to ask him suddenly. But I'm the one that's taking care of writing checks and doing stuff and paying things and making all that happen right now. Bruce Gray, our secretary, replacing Makoto. Makoto, is he in here? Oh, he's outside. Okay. You've probably seen Makoto. He served on this board for many, many years. Prior to that, he was on the grants committee. He was the secretary of the grants committee for some time. Served the board for many, many years, and we appreciate every moment of it. He continues to serve this community aggressively by volunteering his time and effort, and we appreciate that. Todd Ronaldo, sitting right down here, bottom right of the screen. He cleans up pretty good, doesn't he? You need a new picture, yeah, because you were a little fluffier in that picture. You're fuzzier now, but you were fluffier then. But infrastructure czar maintains all of our domains. How many domains do we have? About 30 domains, some of which are parked, but are domains. He takes care of infrastructure and a lot of that kind of thing. You should be on the mic.
We own MetaCPAM's domains, and a few other people just we have a deal where we get the domains for free, so it's easy for us to just maintain those for others.
Absolutely. And Daniel Sockwell, who comes to us from the Raku community. Daniel's also an attorney, which has been very valuable to us from time to time. He was supposed to be here, and in fact, if you remember the schedule as of it was a couple of days ago, he was speaking twice because he's also on the Raku Steering Council. And here I think it is useful to take a note that those are two separate jobs, being on the board and being on steering council. And it's the same for Perl. This board has very little to do with technical decision making. Like almost nothing. Tiny, 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 and effectively nothing, other than the fact that we fund core developers and they actually do that. But it's the steering councils that decide what's the next version going to look like for Perl or Raku. The steering councils are the ones that make those decisions. The grant recipients implement them. And sometimes that's the same people. Some of those folks serve in both groups, but not us. We're not making those decisions. So from time to time, someone will howl about, oh my God, the next version of Perl is doing this and this and this. You guys need to know. That's not what we do. That's not our job. So what do we do? I can't say nothing because that's not true. But we don't do anything technical. Well, not like that. Organizational support. As Todd mentioned, we are caretaker for a number of domains that are about various parts of the ecosystem. We're happy to do more of those because we get them for free. So if your part of the ecosystem has a domain name and you're tired of paying your $20 a year or whatever it is, talk to Todd. I mean, we can fix you up. Let's transfer that in and save some money. We have also lately done some hosting support, not through putting it on our stuff, but finding a place to do the hosting and taking care of sending them money to do that and that kind of thing. We want to support organizations. We also provide the standards of conduct. If you read the darn thing, and I get it, it's really long. It says organizations within the Perl and Raku communities may choose to follow the standards of conduct. And they get for that the use of the response team, if there is something that emerges, and assistance in implementing the code for themselves. We provide those as kind of our product to the sub-communities that make up Perl. Funding management, same kind of thing. We're a tax-deductible nonprofit. Anybody anywhere in the world donates money to us because we are a 501c3. The tax exemption rules of their jurisdiction then apply because they are giving money to a nonprofit charity, an educational charity. So if, for instance, where'd Chrome go? There he is. If, for instance, the Dancer 2 community was wanting to take some donations in order to fund the next version of Dancer, Dancer 3, major new features. We're rewriting a whole big chunk of stuff because we don't think Jason has lost enough hair yet. Then rather than accept that themselves and those donations becoming taxable, they can direct them to the foundation with those funds earmarked for Dancer 2. Then those donations become tax deductible to the donor. That's a value we provide. And then we provide bookkeeping and all that. We don't care much how they implement. We care that the project has good governance and that good governance then tells us where to disperse that money to. So if the Dancer folks or the Dibix class folks or the Raku folks decide they want to fund something as a group and they say we want to raise money for this and this and this and this, all they got to do is tell us. And then say, once we've raised this much money, then we're going to start work And people are going to turn in an hourly report and tell you how many hours they spent, and you're going to disperse this much per hour. And we'll give you a thumbs up to let you know from at least one other person so that it works like a grant. We provide that as a service. Legal and intellectual property. We hold a whole bunch of trademarks and intellectual property. And that's hard for individuals. The way that the law around intellectual property and legal matters around licenses, legal matters around trademarks are, having an individual hold those is a risky business. Because what happens if the person goes away? They get another job, they leave the community because that job uses Java or something, and then you've got this guy who's not doing anything in Perl anymore who holds this intellectual property, and what do? We are a venue for hosting that is going to stay consistent and stay there as long as we possibly can. Hopefully forever. That's our goal. As Stuart says, we do essential things that are not interesting to the technical community. Not so interesting. These are boring things. I mean, bookkeeping is fun if you're a bookkeeper. I kind of like it, but it's not interesting. And it's no one's day job. That's what we do. We do the stuff that's not anybody's day job, that nobody really wants to do. Because if you were doing that for your project, that takes time away from merging code and fixing things and creating new features and all the interesting stuff that technical people like to do. So we do that. We have a pretty broad set of priorities. We've got a nice set of mandates of what we can do in support of the community. Our mission, such as it is pretty broadly worded, that lets us do things that support Perl and Raku and their communities with money and code and design and all these things. But what are our priorities? First of all, sustaining and developing funding. Growing money, making sure money comes in. Now, I'm going to get a little history here. For many, many years, the Foundation's work was largely funded by a handful of companies who pretty reliably could be counted on to, for a phone call or two a year, drop a barrel of money in our lap. Fairly large barrels of money in some cases, and we didn't have to work for it. And in some cases, we didn't have to really account for what we did with it. We were a very unusual sort of organization in that respect. And it really isn't until that stopped being the case that we have come to grips with the fact that we used to be really special about that in that way. Hey, wait a minute, we got to work for this a little harder. So we're learning how to do that better. And this list is part of the fruits of that learning. How many of you remember how many logos were up last year? 2, 3? Yeah. 3 last year? Okay. 5, 6, 7. Yep. Grant Street was here last year. WebPros was here last year. And eCard had sponsored some money but didn't get their logo up. So we made sure they got their logo on this year, and then they sponsored us again this year. And that's not just sponsoring the conference. That's sponsoring everything we do. That's sending money to the foundation and saying, do cool stuff with it. This isn't conference sponsors. This is foundation sponsors. This is the people that make the foundation go. That list, when I started planning this conference, was a lot shorter. A lot shorter. And we have Olaf to thank for that in a large measure, because he has not only done a lot of the legwork, but he's taught us how to. He's shown us how to do it, to help us learn how to be better at sustaining and developing funding. That's one of our priorities. Number 2, funding core maintenance and other grants where possible. The core maintenance grants for Perl in particular are really, really crucial to what we do. Perl needs fixes. Perl needs new features. Yeah, I can't get that. 90% of the commits that go into any release come from 3 guys. And they're all 3 funded by the foundation. 4?
Carl in the back is a huge contributor.
Yep. But he doesn't get any money. He's not one of our core grant recipients. But a vast majority are like 4 people, 3 of whom are getting a grant. All right. So core maintenance depends rather heavily on the funding from us. And so that is one of our priorities. Annual conferences. Now, this used to be done by the Perlmongers groups in local groups, which has its positives and negatives. Number one, it spread the load around a lot because Orlando's doing it this year and Vegas is doing it this year and Baltimore's doing it this year. Well, the Perlmongers groups have kind of, especially since COVID, kind of drained down in their capacity for doing this sort of thing. And that was already ongoing really before COVID. That was really underway before COVID, but it got worse. And so the foundation is doing the producing for that. Now we have a team of volunteers who sit on channel TPRC planning on the Slack. You are welcome. We would love to have you there. Always willing to hear new ideas and new suggestions and new volunteers. No? Okay. Well, we'll get back to that. We want to see more people participating in that. It's the foundation that's producing. We're the checkbook for the conference. We write the checks because you got to pay a few things up front before the money comes in from ticket sales. And it's the foundation board that decides, okay, yeah, that's a good proposal. Let's do it in Greenville this year. And that's why I thanked them right up front this morning when I was talking about the planning for this conference, because the first stop after I had talked with Ade about 3 times was a proposal to the board to host the conference here on these dates. And I had to get a thumbs up from them before I could move forward any further, because there's a contract to be signed. So they had to approve me signing that contract and moving forward to make everything happen. And that's going to have to happen again for next year. And the promotion of Perl and Raku in industry. Don't let the order of these things fool you. My problem here is that the screen isn't the full width, so I could just put them 1, 2, 3, 4. That's my fault too. I know it's a funny meme. These are all high priority kinds of things. And one of the things that in the promotion aspect is really hard because Perl is so ubiquitous. We're like, oh, yeah, everybody's got that, you know. And Raku, it's a different sort of proposition because Raku is at a different point in its lifestyle. But we try to do as much of that as we can. And Stuart in particular, our president, has done a good bit of that in the EU with companies and regulators and organizations within the EU. He's been doing a fair bit of that. And that's great. There's more to be done, and there's reasons why, and that I'll be talking about next in the changes in the industry. All right. Not too many years ago, 8 years ago almost, Neil? It'll be coming up, no, it'll be coming up 7. Yeah, in November I'll be 7 years. A little more than 7 years ago, I was working for a company which I shan't name, but you know, Todd knows who I'm talking about. And we had the CEO get up in front of us and say, we're in a merger and nothing's going to change. Right? Okay, and the laughter in the room tells me that you all think the same thing I did. Anybody that's been in this business more than 6.5 minutes knows That is baloney at best, malicious baloney at worst, and a damn lie right on its face. Okay? Everybody knows that. And probably he even knew that, but he did it anyway. I mean, because he'd been in the business for years and years and years and years, and he said nothing's going to change. And we all kind of went, well, okay. Industry has changed. The IT industry has changed. We've always been a pretty mobile industry. People don't stay with the same place for 30 years, get a gold watch and a pension anymore. That's true across all industries, but it's really true in the knowledge business. 7 years I'll have been working with Clearbuilt this November. That's the longest I've been in any single job in my career, 40 years. And there are reasons for that that are unrelated to this talk. And if you want to catch me afterwards and connect, let's talk about it. Or connect with Neil, because he can tell you. Industry has changed. People don't stick around. Industries get bought. Whole groups of businesses get bought and sold like they are cabbage in the supermarket. And everything changes. And you get a CIO who comes in and says, Perl's too old, we're switching everything to Java tomorrow. Never mind that we have 1.5 million lines of code, get to work. And fires everybody who speaks Perl. And then wonders why that takes so long. Oops. There's other problems. Supply chains have risk built into them. You've probably seen, if you've been watching Hacker News or other places, compromises of tool chains. Node, PHP, Python, Ruby, they've all had this problem. Perl's problems have been small enough to be mostly invisible in that way. Now part of that is luck, I'll give you that. Part of that is some really clever people have worked to make it so that we don't have a whole lot of really malicious code that ends up on CPAN, for instance. I think the same is true in the Raku community. You have some pretty bright people who are saying, you know, somebody's going to try some shenanigans. Let's stop them before they get here. And that's kept that problem, kept that risk minimal in our communities. But they're still there. And they're not going to get smaller. Risk of compromise, risk of hacking, risk of malicious code ending up in a repository, those risks never, ever, ever go down. They only go up. You can control how much and how fast, but that's it. It's the only thing you got as a member of those communities. That's the only thing you really have a handle on. In Europe, there's some interesting new regulation coming out. And I think saying interesting is kind of an understatement, but I'm trying to channel Stuart's British minimalism here and say interesting new regulations. If, for instance, a European mom and pop shop that sells widgets in their little store on a street in a city in Germany, and they also sell online, and they've written an application with Dancer 2 to sell their stuff online. And it's a beauty, and we're happy with them. And a security flaw emerges that they don't deal with in a timely fashion when they could have. Once they know about it, you've got a certain amount of time, you've got to deal with it pronto, move it. If they don't, the fines are enormous and could put that business out of business just like that. Big businesses see that a little differently, and they go, okay, so to prevent that scenario, we need to make sure that that package is secure, and we need to make sure that we know who's doing it so that we can fix it as soon as we find out about it with somebody internal. So the impetus, the desire to use code they didn't write is diminished. So they're going to be less likely to use Dancer 2, and they're going to use an engine they wrote on their own because they have more chances of being able to handle it. How do we as CPAN authors, listen to me, as CPAN authors deal with that? Well, there's a group of folks, he hates the word led because he doesn't feel like he's a leader, but he is a leader. Salva Nielsen over in Europe, who is really shepherding and encouraging and cheerleading and leading in all but name, I think. The CPAN Security Group, they're meeting every other week. They're helping out with all kinds of things. They're working out how do we add additional metadata about security to CPAN modules. How do we add a security policy to CPAN modules and communicating that to CPAN authors. I noticed, Jason Chrome, something that's not my fault, but Salve's fault. They got a ticket. Please include a security policy. And they gave some guidance on what that ought to look like. That's one of the patches that's going into Dancer 2. That security policy talks about if we're told about it, this is our desire to get it fixed. Here's a security contact for you to get hold of, an email address, something so you can find that. That's going to help that large business and even the smaller businesses decide to use Dancer 2 because they know that those security problems will be dealt with promptly so that they don't get fined. They're not going to fine Jason for the breakage in CPAN or in Dancer, even if he did it, even if it really is his fault. They're not going to bust him. They're going to bust the business that's using it. And if that's not scary to a business owner, then they're fearless. They're Schwarzenegger level fearless. And the fact of the matter is, at some point or another, when our country is less distracted by culture war, the same thing is as likely to happen. Ditto in Canada. There's no reason for it not to happen. That you start getting software liability for the software you use to run your business. So the security posture of every package in your tool chain needs to be dealt with. You might see the term SBOM, S-B-O-M, Software Bill of Materials, which is there to describe, Bloomberg's already working on that apparently, because I just saw a big thumbs up. Software Bill of Materials describes your set of dependencies extremely thoroughly, including their security policies. So then you use that as a decision tool to decide, do we use Dancer or do we use Mojo? Or do we use Catalyst? Oh, which versions do we use? Oh, there was a CVE against this version that has been fixed. So we don't want to use that version because it's fixed in this version. All of that information is part of an SBOM and a decision making for that resilience of security information. It's coming. And open source funding. Say what you want about some of those early open source heroes, some of those early people in the open source movement, Eric Raymond and others. And they're as human as the rest of us and have made their errors. But one part of it, software, open source software is not free as in beer. You don't get to just consume it and go on about your way. Not anymore. It's free as in a kitten. You can pick it up, sure, but then you got to feed it, take it to the doctor, take care of it, make sure it has its shots every year, all of that stuff, right? Software is not free as in beer anymore. Full stop. There's an awful lot of companies, particularly on this side of the Atlantic, that have kind of lost sight of that. That have kind of gone, this is an open source thing, we can just take it and use it, and whatever. And the software liability and cyber resilience sort of legislation is going to force them back toward paying attention to that code. Where you've had in the past large companies that understood that and provided big barrels of money to the people that produce the software that they use. They give back. Either through producing and releasing code of their own to the community to use for their stuff, money, both, developer time to maintain packages that people use. All of those things are ways that they can give back. but we've had a growing number of businesses that don't. And that's affected our funding because those companies go, I use Perl, don't care. We'll just stay on 524 forever. Thank you. Yep. Take the stick. There you go.
This has happened to me at places I've worked, financial companies that deal with any credit card data. There are standards for the security on those systems, and one of their requirements, and this is one thing that might help us, they must use supported software. So they can't stay on, they can no longer stay on 516 till hell freezes over.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these places, IBM stopped taking money to support Red Hat 6. So a lot of companies are converting to 8. 9 is out there, but they're not bleeding edge. So the point is, if we, as a community, started talking to these places, I don't know where the best place to contact them is, you're going to need to upgrade it. These are the supported versions. These are the upgrade paths you have. These are ways of upgrading. I'd be willing to help publish documents on.
Right.
If you want
And
to
that's
upgrade,
part of.
This is how you would. This is how to keep your Perl fed.
The American version of this, while mostly being applied to financials, is already starting. Right? And it's a matter of time, I think, not a matter of if, before we have things like the EU's Cyber Resilience Act for companies, the companies we work for, the companies that use the stuff we write, to have to deal with those things. And the foundation is trying to help make that as easy as we can. And the CPAN Security Group, big part of that. They are doing some fantastic work. They became the CVE numbering authority for Perl and all modules installed in CPAN a while back. What, a month and a half ago? Something like that? Yeah, a couple months ago. They became the CVE authority globally for Perl and CPAN modules. So if you're a CPAN author, and just for check, how many of you are CPAN authors? You have one or more published modules on CPAN. Okay. If you get a CVE notice from the CPAN security group, get cracking, fix it, get a new release out pronto, and make sure your old one gets killed off. Take it off of CPAN. Quick. That I don't know yet. I have not worked on that.
CPAN Security Group has their own email domain. We're working on getting that set up right now, but it will be coming from that.
Okay.
Will we know what the conferences are?
No, we're working on setting it up with Fastmail right now.
You just said something very interesting. You said, get the old one off.
Yeah, you occasionally will get, if you're a CPAN author, you'll occasionally get an email that says, please delete your old versions from CPAN. They'll still be available in Backpan, but CPAN itself, intent is to install the latest functional version that doesn't have a security issue. If you've got one that's a CVE against it, you can delete it and pause.
But my follow-up to that is, when there's CVEs against Perl, are we going to keep the old Perl versions up on the site? Or are we not?
That is something that the CPAN security group has had conversations about. I've been watching their Matrix channel for 6 months now. And that's among the things that they conversed about at Toolchain Summit a month and a half ago. So those are things that they're considering. Is if a CVE were to come out against 540, do we gun it? Or do we fix it and put out a point release and then gun it? What do we do? That's on them. Yep.
Just like I had CD that was in 530. I mean, it was actually in a bunch of ones since it started. It was introduced when the feature was introduced, but we only fixed it in 538 and 540 as those were the surviving ones, or I mean the supported ones. The patch, as I told Todd, worked on earlier, and so he used that internally for theirs. But anyway, should we nuke 536? I don't know.
I don't know. That is something the CPAN security group probably ought to talk about, and the steering councils should talk about. And the same thing is true on the Raku side. You have the same set of risks and the same set of problems. Those need to be dealt with, and that's the kind of thing that changes in our industry have happened. Now, I'm going to be a little bit of a confessional here. I will say, now I've been on the board 2 years, and what's evident to me after 2 years, year and a half on the board now, is that some of these changes happened and the foundation and its board didn't quite get the message quickly enough. The funding kind of dried up, and we kind of went, oh, well, there are people using Perl. We got to figure something out. Okay. And if you read Makoto's blog last winter, you could see some evidence of that. Those big barrels of money stopped coming over the waterfall, right? All of these changes mean that we got to change. And it feels to me like, and this is kind of my impressions of the last few months of our board meeting, is that we're getting it. Now, notice please that I used present tense verb there. We are presently, right now, today, getting it. We're figuring this stuff out. Knowing what it means, understanding what it means, is complicated. As our questions here have pointed out, this is complex stuff. We're changing. One of the things we need to do, particularly to deal with funding, is better sponsor-donor relationship. All right? Sponsors are telling us, we want to know more about what you do with that money. And if you'll tell us a little more about what you do with that money, we'll give you more. If it's something we think is a good thing to do. And yeah, we kind of think it is a good thing to do. Would you tell us some more? We need to do that better. We need to raise up more donors, because the days of great big barrels of money are gone. Pretty much. There's still a few big barrels out there, but most of them not as big as they used to be. It's not how the economy works right now. There might be later, but let's hope so. That'd be great. But the days of great big barrels of money are mostly over for foundations like us. So we need to find more of them. Now, if one big barrel with $100,000 coming over the waterfall every year was a good thing, wouldn't 4 barrels with a quarter of that coming over be just about as good? Sure, absolutely. So we need to find more barrels. And we also need to find more individuals. We have about 6 people who donate money every month to the Perl and Raku Foundation through a couple of different paths. And it's a monthly thing, and they've signed up. It's a PayPal subscription in several cases. And they pay $5, $10, $20 a month to the Perl Foundation. We use that money. Yeah. It counts. Okay, if you've noticed, Makoto did a thing on Perl and Raku in Slack a little while ago and said, for $50 at the registration desk, you can get a patch that says, I patched Perl. That's about 1 hour of work on Perl core maintenance. We used to have some for Raku too. I think those went over to Europe with Liz and Wendy maybe. But a patch that says, I patched Perl, because you're paying about an hour's worth of work, which for a simple bug fix is about right. So if you were donating $5 a month, what would you be donating in a year? About an hour's worth of work, a little more. on the Perl core. You want to? We need to set up better ways of attracting more of that, and we need to set up better ways of managing that and reporting back to people and making them feel good about it. Let me give you an example. Our raffle out here. I told you this morning that one ticket you buys what? 4 meals. Thank you. That's stuck. That's what we need to do with Perl. If you spend $5 a month on Perl, you get 1 hour of some really, really, really smart people's time to fix Perl. And don't worry, yeah, it's probably the stuff you want, because the stuff you want, lots of people want. And we'll tell you more about what you got for that, what you and everybody else collectively got for that. We're working on how to do that better. We had a thing for the last few years, we've called it the prospectus, and it was kind of targeted at big donors that we wanted to give money. Well, better yet, how about an annual activity report that we give to people who did give, to encourage them to give again? Get them. We need to do more of that stuff. Olaf is teaching us how. Olaf is showing us the way because he knows how to do this stuff. He's taken that skill and he's teaching us. Okay, community outreach and encouragement. Perl is not and has never been a monolithic community. The same is true for Raku, although being somewhat smaller, it's a little more compact and close together and newer. But in Perl especially, we're not one big block of people doing all the same thing. We are islands in a huge archipelago of islands. And in many cases, in far too many cases, there are no bridges between them. You can't get from here to there. You can't find out about that guy because you never hear from him. Or because they're off doing their own thing, and who other than board members and Makoto can tell me how many people were at YAPC Japan last year? Carl, probably.
It's over 400.
Yeah, they had a huge conference last year. Massive. They're killing it over there.
400 is small for a
Yeah. 400 is small for their YAPC, for YAPC Japan.
Closer to 500.
Yeah. Most of us don't even have a clue about any of that going on. Yeah.
Well, and to be clear, they saw the tickets and they couldn't so the thing is, the venue was too small for YAPC and then they couldn't get more ticket sales. So it didn't mean we had only 400. They could have sold more if they had
If they'd had room. They ran out of room. That is awesome. Absolutely it is. So part of what, and in January, you might have seen the news on news.pearlfoundation.org, which if you're not reading it, why ever not? It's not terribly busy, and it does have an RSS feed. Please use it if you still use RSS. I was appointed the chair of community engagement. It's my job to build bridges. That's it. That's all. Get people talking to each other. Have you noticed? Somebody did notice earlier and said so to me. They're saying connection a lot in this conference. If you think that isn't by design, you haven't been paying attention. That is by design. Connection is what's going to keep this community growing and being stronger and keep it strong and keep it able to meet the challenges of business in the 21st century. Simple as that. It is that simple. And so community outreach engagement, that's something we're doing more of. We're starting a community roundtable, a monthly meeting on Zoom. If your project needs more bodies, needs more eyeballs, need more coders, come to that meeting. It's on the 4th Friday of the month on Zoom. You can also check into the hashtag community roundtable channel on the Slack. Come and join us and tell us. You'll get 5 minutes to tell us about your community, what you've been up to, what great new news do you have, Jason Chrome, and What do you need? And how do people get a hold of you to come and help with that? We want you there. And we're helping to deferialize infrastructure. We have a lot of systems out there where one guy thought up this really great idea and implemented it, and everybody's using it. And somebody yelled, well, volunteered. Well, what happens when that person gets really old and gray-headed and doesn't want to do this anymore? Or they've moved on to other jobs. Or they've moved up and they're stupid busy, got no time for that stuff anymore. We need to deferialize that infrastructure. Bring those things together so we can find people to help maintain them and keep them collaborating and keep them working. I'll give an example of that in my lightning talk tomorrow in CPAN testers. So what do we as a board need? First of all, we need money. That sounds callous, doesn't it? Yeah, okay. But we need money. Because we've got that lots of important work to do. Does anybody, just for check, does anybody think the stuff we're doing is unimportant? Okay, good. That's what I was hoping I'd gotten that far. But you don't have to do all the legwork. We're learning how to do it better. Who do you know that's in the software business that cares about Perl? Or could care about Perl if they were informed enough to care? Like, I have this small company that we collaborate with, or we have this one guy from that company who comes to our Perl Mongers group, and tell us about him. We'll take care of the rest. We got some great tags that Olaf has written. We can send them and talk about stuff. And we want to work with them. We want to get their names on this banner. I want next year's banner to be 2 columns or more. Give you a book full of names. Tell us who you know. We'll do the rest. Volunteers. We need people who are willing to serve. We all have skills that don't have to do with writing Perl. Now, some of those skills, I will stipulate, are probably not terribly useful to the Perl community, like refereeing water ball matches. I mean, water polo is not something we need. But you probably have some skill that we do need. You don't know if you don't ask. Bring it to us. We need people who care about other people and about code to come to us and offer their time and their skills. If you only have a little, that's fine. If you got a whole bunch, that's fine too. We'll find ways to make use of it. I was talking with Zeke earlier. Where's Zeke? Where'd he go? There he is. I was talking with Zeke earlier about other conference opportunities. He's already volunteered. First timer, and he's already volunteered a whole bunch of time here. And he found out about it and went, oh, it's in my town. I'll just go. Well, we're already talking about how can you continue to help? Well, that's come to us and talk to us, any of us. If you're interested in infrastructure, talk to Todd Ronaldo. He's the infrastructure czar. We want you to help him out because, he's going to turn gray-headed with all the work he's got to do. We need ideas. Just for check, does anybody in the room know everything there is to know about everything? Hush, Josh, not you. Yeah, and Coke might. He and I just met a couple of days ago, so I'm not sure, but he might. It's possible. But none of the rest of us knows everything there is to know about everything, really. I mean, and we've had officers who don't really know that much about doing their job. And that's fine. Let's learn how to do it together. We'll grow together. Bring ideas, bring skills, and connection. What island are you working on? What islands? Maybe you're working on a little cluster of islands over here that does web applications for manufacturing interests. Maybe you're over here trying to write a web framework. Maybe somebody else over here is writing database wrangling. Well, those people need connection. We need to make sure they're plugged into each other and can talk to each other and make sure that the stuff they're all doing can benefit from each other. Tell us about your islands of Perl activity. Let's talk about them together and share them with the world. Come to our community roundtable meeting. If you're more interested in that, come and see me, because we'd love to have more communities represented. We got a few diehards, and every month they tell us some cool stuff that they've been doing. Salve's one of them. Every month he's got something that CPAN Security's doing. But come and tell us those things, because we want to know about it. Okay? The rest of our time, and we've got another maybe 10 minutes, is for you. Do we have any additional questions? Anything else out there? Okay. Uh-oh. One might be questions, one might be heckling. I'm not sure yet.
Well, this was definitely a question. So a while back, I remember there was a controversy, I think it was DBIX class, but it was essentially what do we do with the ownership of namespaces? And I saw that you guys had a lot about ownership of trademarks, things like that. If something like a CPAN author wanted to say, well, if the foundation wants to run with this namespace, I hereby authorize it. That would be a nice mechanism somehow.
I think I don't disagree with you. I think having some sort of control over your namespaces, which right now you kind of get from PAWS. If you're the first come to a namespace, it's your baby. There you go. You kind of get that built in the way it is. That's not 100% perfectly managed. I will give you that. And part of the reason for that is it's volunteer maintained like everything else in here. All the rest of that tool chain, that's all done by volunteers, one or two in particular. And so it's not perfectly done. I will give you that. But I agree with you. I think a way to manage the intellectual property of a namespace, there's complications. That's not easy, because anything legal is not. That's the lawyers make it that way on purpose because that's how they make money. But we can aspire to that and think about how we can do that in interesting new ways. And I would love to talk with you sometime about what would be the needs of that, and then we can take that and start talking it up around the board and start talking about with the maintainers at PAWS and all of that. Connect those islands. Let's put them together, get them talking. Matthew Persico had his hand up.
Where's the Venmo or the PayPal for the donations? Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're still working. We are in the process of re-implementing the whole website, including all our donation links. Everything is in the process of re-implementing. Right now, there are some ways to donate listed on our older website. They all work at pearlfoundation.org. I think it's /donate, if I remember right, or /page/donate. Those do work. Please do feel free to donate. You're also perfectly welcome to catch myself or Sarah during the conference. We'll be happy to take your donation. Any other thoughts, questions before we adjourn? One more.
Is there a defined set of Perl best practices or Raku best practices?
Boy, I could get into all kinds of... Oh, boy.
For best practices, I mean by code, like use script, use warnings. Because there is more than one way to do it.
Yeah.
Saying use script, use warnings. I mean, things that basically everybody can agree on. A list of modules.
Quiet, please. Please.
A list of modules that you can depend on in CPAN that will be, that are currently maintained. Because if I look at CPAN++, if I look at CPAN and there are modules that have stars or whatever, one module might have 3 stars, another one has 4 stars. So 3 people thought this one was good, 4 people thought that one was good, and apparently there are 7 people in the world using those modules.
It's fair. And there's actually some conversations going on about that. Right now, CPAN testers, and I'll talk about this tomorrow in my lightning talk, CPAN testers will provide you some test results that you can use as a decision tool. There is talk about a new interface for CPAN testers that incorporates security information, SBOM data, that kind of thing, and brings in more information to use as a decision tool. That's not a foundation project. It's one of those islands working out there, the CPAN testers group. But certainly we encourage that kind of thing because it helps then meet those security challenges, right? So as for, is there a set of best practices? Oh, I could start a civil war right here, right now. Yeah, baby. Damian Conway, have you read Damian's book, Perl Best Practices?
No.
Okay, it's a good start. It is a set of best practices. Is it the set of best practices? No. There's a whole bunch of them, but Damian's set is pretty good on its face, given that it's pretty dated right now. It's been around a while. Perl Critic implements a number of those features, so you just say Perl Critic my code, and it prints out, here's the things that are problems, and how big a problem is this, against Perl best practices, and a few other things. We could turn that into a 6-hour session real easy. So I'm going to balk on saying, yes, there is, here it is, because, no, but that is a good place to start.
I wasn't necessarily looking for, the only set of best practices, but, is there a defined set?
Yeah. Perl Best Practices by Damian Conway is a great place to start. And really, it is a good practice. Here's some good practices. And you can pick and choose from those as a menu of good ideas. And what we have done at Clearbuilt, now the company I work for has 2 owners and 1 employee. 2/3 of the company is right here. We have implemented a Perl Critic RC file, or a control file for Perl Critic, so we can run Perl Critic against the code and see where we're not behaving the way we have agreed to behave. We feel this is a best practice in our organization for these reasons, because it makes the code easier to read, easier to debug, and easier to maintain. And you really, to be honest and to be thorough, I need to say, your organization, whether it's the maintainers of Dancer 2 or a company or your own work, need to define your own set of best practices and stick to it the best you can, and realize there's going to be exceptions where you got to do something wonky, and put in the best practices. When you do something really crazy, comment it. Magic here. There are comments in our code. One of them says, rude forms are rude because they won't return null. They return blank, and I want null. And so I have to do this little loop that clears up all these blanks and turns them into nulls. Well, I've commented that. Rude forms are rude. So now Neil knows where to find those. He just grep for rude, and he's got it. He can grep for magic and find the places that I've used magic. Where you put your magic might be part of those best practices. We try to put all our projects, we use DivX class extensively, and we use Dancer 2 in our work. We put as much of the magic in our class for database as we can. We put it there so we know where it is, so we know where to look for it. We are just about out of time. Yeah. Yeah, this is a huge, yeah, absolutely. We are slap out of time. Because this hall, do what? One more from Carl. What do you got? Okay, yep.
First of all, Ruth, thank you for everything you do for the community, and this conference is fabulous. Thank you, Ruth. That said, I still have a question for the foundation. It may be painful, sorry about that. In 2016, we had a YAPC in Orlando, and then foundation got donation of 260K. That's a lot of money. Obviously, we are not getting that money anymore. What do you think? What will happen to the foundation and conference in the future? Do you have like plan B if fundraising does not go as we wanted?
Absolutely. And I talked about this a little bit earlier. And I know, Makoto, you've been in and out, so I'll recap quickly. The foundation has really come to grips with and come to understand that the old way of funding the foundation, very large money, barrels of money being thrown at us, is gone. That's not happening near as much anymore. We understand that now in a way that perhaps we hadn't for too long. We didn't really get a grip on that until fairly recently, right? We were starting to get a grip on it last fall when you were still with us, but I think we've done much more progress since then. So we're exploring additional avenues. We're doing a lot more outreach to companies using Perl and interested in Perl. And we're working on completely new paths of funding through individuals as well, because that adds up in a big hurry. So Plan B is already underway. We're solving that, and this list is evidence of that fact. Because in January, if I had to send this banner off to be produced, it would have had 1, 2, 3 on it. And that's not the case anymore. Now there's 7 logos up there. And next year, my goal, this is me, not the rest of the board or the foundation or anything, is to have 2 columns with great big logos like this on both sides. Maybe have another banner. That'd be great. Plan B is find more barrels. They don't have to be as big that way, but they got to be more of them. That's the big plan. Okay? Real quickly, Sarah.
And this conference is the first conference for ever that is designed to be break even. So you see that we've had build your own lunch, and we've shortened the conference. We're in a smaller venue. We found a million ways to make it affordable. So Makoto, we want to keep having conferences, but part of continuing to be able to have conferences is to make them budget neutral. So that they do not cost a lot of money that we have to get from donors, so that we are able to live within our means and still meet and have an opportunity to be together.
Yep. We want to keep doing this opportunity because it's important. We know that connection is important. We know that Hallway Plus Plus, or whatever it is that Chrome's got to say this year, or whatever Stuckwish comes up with at the last minute, those are things that are important to hear. We want to keep doing that. I want to keep seeing your faces every year. Even and perhaps especially you new folks. We want to see you next year. Thank you. Rich Drapikowski prepared the lunches. He was leading that effort. Let's thank our volunteer for that. Did a lovely job, yes. And that's part of, we can't have conferences that cost the foundation tens of thousands of dollars every year, because then we can't give that money to core maintainers and to other priorities. And we have to raise that much more to do the core stuff we want to do. That core money is about $70,000 a year, by the way, more or less, because they're all kind of at liberty to spend the hours they want to spend. But it comes up to about $70,000 a year. That's a lot of bones. I get it. We're working out better ways to raise more of it, even if we have to do it in smaller bites, so that we can keep doing that. And keeping these conferences where they're not breaking the bank is a part of that. There is good news. Rough numbers. This conference is going to break even and might make a few hundred. Just a little over. Not sure yet. But I will be reporting on that on newspearlfoundation.org and writing a long article about how we did it and why we did it, because that needs to happen again. Right? Okay. This room needs to close for preparations for dinner and the caterer will be working out in the lobby, so we need to move out past the registration area. Please come on back in at 7 p.m. and enjoy a great dinner. Have a lovely afternoon.